Welcome to the Clubroom. This is Mark Moyer, and I'm super jazzed to have Dr. Robyn Odegaard here. But before I bring her on board and in, I just want to do a quick little mini bio, if that's cool. And I was impressed to hear that she was born and raised in Central California, but she actually grew up on a small farm, and she did work at a ranch, and she did some bareback horseback riding, and there's a lot of really amazing stuff to hear about from her childhood growing up. But it's interesting because in high school she was the valedictorian, and she ended up not going to college, but instead started working, and actually didn't start attending college until she was 32. But just in 6 short years, she got her undergraduate, her master's degree, her doctorate. I mean, brilliant, brilliant person. And on top of all that, she's spoken on the TEDx stage. She has written 3 books. She has spent 15 years in the corporate space. She's 14 years in coaching and consulting. And but one of the things that really intrigued me about her background is that she was a professional beach volleyball player. That's pretty damn cool. And so she does a lot of volunteering work, all kinds of things. So come on in, Dr. Robyn.
Here I am. There we go. It works.
Yeah, you go team. Right off the bat, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you joining us in our club room here and in this format where you sort of have a chance to move around and chat with people, which makes it kind of a little bit more interesting. But do me a favor, and the first question right off the bat I want to ask you, because I'm really curious about this. What on earth compelled you? What was that day you woke up and you said, you know what, I'm going to start doing this whole coaching and consulting thing?
So I have to go way back to answer that question. I'm the oldest of 8 children.
Wow.
And so I was always responsible. I was more parent than child. I still have 3 siblings that I consider my children. And so I was always that person that people came to, even long before I had a psychology degree. One watershed moment for me, I was working in the corporate world, sitting on a conference call, and a guy comes into my office, one of the other managers comes into my office, and he has an employee with him, and she is sobbing, like ugly crying. And he says to me, "Can you talk to her? Her boyfriend just held a gun to her head for 2 hours," and left her in my office. And so I transferred my conference call and I tried to talk to her, and I ended up going to his apartment. We hid the guns just so we'd have a fighting chance. And I moved her out. I moved her in with me, and she stayed with me for 2 nights before going back to him. And for me, that was a real, like, I don't understand. I was a volleyball player. I understood you do the weights and you do this and you get results. I did not understand the mental aspect of go back to someone who held a gun to your head. And so when I had the opportunity to go to college when I was 32, I knew I wanted to understand human performance and how come sometimes I could get on the volleyball court and it was like, I can do no wrong. And other times I get on the volleyball court and it was like, have I ever touched a volleyball in my life? And then add on to this, the aspect of that story really was powerful for me.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because I was 22 and living in Huntington Beach, California, just for a little while, and I was there was a young lady that lived in the apartment next door with her husband, and they were very, they came from Nebraska or something, and she was getting actually abused a little bit, and a lot of it, and she came over to my apartment once, knocked on the door, came in, said, "Do you mind if I hang out here for a little while?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." She brought with her a crack pipe and a gun. And I was like, well, this little boy from Connecticut hasn't seen this kind of stuff before. And then she smoked the crack right in front of me and just kind of put the gun down. I said, why don't we just kind of leave, like you said, let's leave it over there for a little while. Yeah. But eventually she did move out from the guy. He was a pretty bad dude. But yeah, it's like, what do you, I'm assuming, so that led to you saying, you know what, maybe I can help people like this.
It was never, I can help people. So it was never, I'm going to go fix the world. I don't have that kind of complex. I have more of I've been through a lot. My website says I create success out of chaos. guys that were at the table I was talking to, my father married me off when I was 18, literally, to my first cousin who moved me across the country when I was 18 years old. And I had to figure out how to be a grown-up for two of us because he was 11 years my senior, but couldn't be a grown-up. And it took me 6 months to realize he had a drug problem. He was very badly in debt and he wasn't very bright. Yay, Dad, trifecta, yay, that's great. So for me, it was never, I want to go fix people. It was more, I want to understand humans. And then when I got out of when I finished my doctoral degree and I did my dissertation, I did a team development and leadership development program for a D1 swim team. I realized all of these lessons, the school of hard knocks, the stuff that I've learned, I can use this to help other people. That was when I was like, okay, let me take this mess of my life that I'm kind of sort of starting to get straightened out and see if I can let other people make different mistakes, learn from mine.
And so what's interesting is that when people ask me, Mark, are you a certified career coach? Are you certified and all this stuff? And I try to tell them, look, I'm certified in like the streets of New York or something. That's how, and I feel like it's similar to you. I mean, you've got all this education behind you, but I think that may have given you the structure, but you probably lean quite a bit on your life. Right?
I do, very much so. And people ask me regularly, are you licensed? And I'm not, on purpose. And here's why. Licensure has not kept up with technology. And if I were licensed as a psychologist, I would only be allowed to work with clients or patients who were physically in the state in which I was licensed. My clients are global and mobile. So sorry, you're in an airplane. I can't help you. Can't be licensed in that state. So I'm purposefully not licensed so I can support my clients wherever they are in the world without having to jump through weird licensure hoops that haven't kept up with technology.
That's interesting. So today, I mean, look, there's so many people out there that do this whole, whether it's self-help or psychology or psychiatry or therapy or whatever. What's your overall take on them and the guidance or the advice that they give? This is a safe space, by the way. Space. You can say whatever you want.
I'm very honest about this. I think that the coaching world is a very deep pool full of very shallow people.
Nice.
And it's hard. It is hard to find someone who's really good. And the thing that I tell people is that if people are out there touting, look at me, I'm amazing, I have a jet, I can teach you to have a jet too. That is so fake. What you want is someone who's going to say to you, let me meet you where you are and let's spend some time together. And then you can decide if I bring you value. And you know this, Mark, my business model is thus: 25 minutes hello conversation. Let's just have a chit chat. And then if you think, yeah, I might be able to talk to that woman, let's do the work. Let's spend 2 hours, powerful conversation. Let's get in, figure out where you are. And at the end of that, you can pay me what you think it's worth. I'm not going to put a price tag on it.
And you know what? You don't need to.
People pay me big numbers. And I'll ask them, if I had told you before we did this that, hey, I'm going to charge you this big number, would you? No, I never would have done it. I would have told you were nuts, but I could put another zero on that and still have gotten the value out of it.
Well, yeah, that's the interesting thing about not just coaching in general, because I absolutely agree with you. It's possible I've met some other coaches that I'm amazed that they're able to have a business, but it's sort of like with some other things I've seen, like resume writers and some other sort of professions that I feel they're either learning it from Google or something, and they're not really pulling it from whether it's life experience or professional experience. But it's interesting that you say that, because I believe that when any of us talk about, okay, our service is X amount, it is a bit of a sort of a sticker shock, like you say, but on the other side of things, you're right. You're like, wow, this was life-changing. I mean, hopefully that's what we're trying to do here, right?
And that's why I let them experience the value before putting any kind of number on it. And I think that that's what's important, is saying, yeah, I come with this Swiss Army knife that goes with my Mental MacGyver, right? I come with a Swiss Army knife of tools. Let's see if any of them work for you before you even have to put a number on it.
Mine would be the bottle opener. Anyways, so look, a lot of people here are very accomplished. Many of them are entrepreneurs. Many of them are also athletes, current and former, and they've been used to achieving success and greatness. But
Mhm.
in the middle of all that, there are times when there's losses and there are challenges and there's hurdles to climb over and so forth. And a lot of times that's where we're tested the most. It's not, can we win again? It's, oh, did I say win again? It's the name of my book. Anyway, that was terrible. So no, but instead of the whole the whole prospect of continuing to win, I think it's best to find out how do we act and react when we lose. Tell me a little bit about your approach to that when, as you said in something we talked about, that a lot of times people come to you when, as you say, the shit hits the fan, right? It's when you're in your deepest valley that you're like, time to call Dr. Robyn. Tell me a little bit about what happens there and what your approach is to that.
Yeah, so people come to me when something, I say, goes sideways. Something happens that they suddenly realize I need someone to talk to. And most of my clients are men, not exclusively, but most of my clients are men. They're usually men 40, give or take, because that's when men suddenly realize, wait a minute, I'm not invincible. I thought I was. No, I'm not. Athletes skew a little younger because they tend to get done with their professional careers a little sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have something that's gone very, very sideways. And I ask my clients, before you had me, if you really, really needed to talk to somebody, who are you talking to? And the answers I get are strippers, bartenders, taxi drivers, the barber, their trainer at the gym. I'm like, you do not have a confidentiality agreement with any of those people. And not only that, what kind of advice could they possibly be giving you? Not that they're not great humans. I'm sure they're great humans. But that's when they come to me, is when they realize I need someone who has confidentiality and can, I'm going to say, this is going to sound obnoxious, but has a brain in her head that can actually understand how business works in personal life and all of that.
Wait a minute, bartenders don't have those?
They do. I'm sure they're awesome humans, but they don't have the business acumen that I do.
Plus, they don't have as much time. They're serving drinks.
Right.
So what do you think is one of the biggest problems that you've had to help people through?
Well, the biggest one, the one that I often share, and I share this with permission, a client did give me permission. He didn't come to me for this issue. He came to me for a business issue, but 3 months into our working there, he called me on a Saturday. And each of my clients have an individual ringtone. So I know when my phone goes off who it is before I even reach for my phone. And I thought, that's weird. He never calls me on Saturday. So I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, what's up? And he says, Robyn, my dad just went on life support. I'm the executor. You have to help me decide if I'm going to kill my father. And that's heavy. That's I spent 2.5 hours on the phone with him while I was weeding my garden, basically helping him manage his brothers and their opinions and his ex-wife and her opinions. And so he was on and off, putting me on hold and talking to other people. But that's the level of commitment that I have and trust that I have with my clients, is that when things like that happen, I'm the person they call. And that's why I don't have an hourly rate. What I do working by the hour would be a conflict of interest. I never, ever, ever want a client to think, oh, wow, I really would like to talk to Robyn. I don't want her to start the clock. That's not a thing.
Oh, that's totally, I tell people all the time that if you do it by the hour, people are always looking at the clock going, all right, how much time do I have left? Oh no, I only have 3.5 minutes left. I got to speed things. No, it's terrible. And I've also found that people absorb things at different rates of speed. They interpret things in different rates of speed and so forth. So you're right. Putting a clock on anything is, especially, this is really important stuff. It's whether it's, again, dealing with their life. These are their lives, and whether it's professional, personal, career, whatever it is, it's when you put that pressure on people to say, well, yes, we're done now. We'll talk to you next Tuesday at 2:00. People are like, wait, what? I have to wait 6 days and 23 hours until my next.
And I have to remember everything I wanted to say to you. But yeah. And the thing is, high performers, and this is true of, because all of you here know this, I'm preaching to the choir. We take on way too much. Yes, I can do that. Sure, I can do that. Absolutely, I can do that. And then we end up overworked, overwhelmed, and underutilized. And that sounds like those things shouldn't go together, but here's what happens. We end up overworked because we're taking on a whole bunch of stuff that isn't in our zone of genius, but we can do it, and we can probably do it better than most people, but it's not in our zone of genius. But we take it on, and then so we end up overworked, overwhelmed, because my plate is so full I can only do stuff that falls off the edges of it, catch it as it, falls off the side. But we're underutilized because our zone of genius, we're not spending enough time in it doing the amazing things that only we can do.
Do you know anybody like that?
No.
I don't have too much on my plate. I just have lots of plates. So
Right.
I'm constantly juggling them and spinning them and whatever it is. But you're absolutely right. And I think what happens, especially as people become, whether it's more prominent or more comfortable in their profession, is they tend to take on more things that are in that zone of genius, but they expand their zone of genius because as you sort of gain experience and wisdom over time, that zone of genius gets pretty big, and then it gets to be challenging to be able to say either no or not now, or so how do you either yourself or advise other people to push aside things that are really sort of time sucks?
Well, so the question you have to ask is, what's the difference between being really good at something and being great at it?
Yeah.
And for me, the difference is, do I love it? Because I can be pretty good at just about anything with enough practice. Like, I can be pretty good at stuff, but do I love it? Does it bring me joy? Can I get in the zone? Can I get in flow? Those are the places I want to spend more of my time. And so that's what we start to investigate is, if you want, so the question I love to ask my clients, what do you want to be different? If you want to be different, that you don't feel overwhelmed, overworked, and underutilized, then you have to figure out, what does it look like to be well utilized, working at the level you want to work at, and feeling joyful? And that question is, what are you great at? What do you love doing? And how do we get you to do more of that and less of all of the other stuff? And often when I start digging into it, when I ask someone, so this other stuff that you're good at, you're decent, why are you doing that? Well, so-and-so, so this isn't about you, that's about so-and-so. And that comes down to I talk about psychological barriers a lot, but the last piece of the 5-point paradigm for creating success out of chaos is about nurturing your support system. People, places, things, and habits that either help or hurt. And often we keep too many people around who are hurting because we can juggle all of those plates all of the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the best books I've read that really had an impact on me, it was a book by a guy named Perry Marshall called 80-20 Sales and Marketing. And even though it dealt with some sales stuff and some marketing stuff, but he really talks about how, as an entrepreneur, we have, during the course of our day, let's say during that course of that day, let's say it's 10 hours, and we're let's say making $1,000 a day somehow. During that course of that day, maybe 800 of it happens in 20 minutes, or 700 of it happens in a few short time. And then the rest of the time, you make little chunks here and there, and then there's a bunch of time you don't make anything because it's just stuff to do. And he says, look, focus on that, as you said, that zone of genius, that time that you are flying on all cylinders, cranking, and really delivering the greatest value. And then push off the rest of the stuff and find either people to delegate it to or other people that are better at it. It doesn't mean someone who's beneath you doing it. It could be somebody who's at your level, but they're just really good at that stuff, and just pass it on. And I think that's something that we all need to really focus on.
The easiest thing is for us to allow today to become a continuation of the past. And so what we have to remember is that any motivation for change comes from the future. My future self will be better. And we have to pull that motivation from the future into the present so that we can make a change today, because change happens in the present. The cause is in the past, the change is in the present, and the motivation is in the future. And building that together is what allows us to create that zone of genius, able to succeed on all cylinders, as you were saying.
That's really neat. Well, I want to pivot just a little bit and talk about something that I posted about yesterday that you talk about, and we both talk about, but the imposter syndrome. And especially in this environment, this framework, I talk a lot about, athletes as they transition from their sport to what they do next. And, one of the biggest challenges is that an athlete on their field, rink, court, whatever it is, they're incredibly confident of their skill set. Now, if they're confident they may win or lose, it's a different story, but they are good at what they do. They're an elite athlete. But when they retire, when they leave their sport, sometimes there's a concern about, wait a minute, I can't be successful in business. I've been playing a sport my whole life. I haven't been, taking advanced degrees. I haven't been doing, and there's a tendency to build up in their minds that the business people are way smarter, way whatevering, and bring a lot more to the table. And a lot of times what we need to do is explain to them, no, you bring so much to the table that actually a non-athlete doesn't bring. But tell me a little bit more about how you see imposter syndrome, not just in this context, but with with executives.
Yeah. So my TEDx talk is about my struggle with imposter syndrome and the belief that everyone else was so much smarter than me and everyone else had it all together and everyone else knew what was going on and I was the only one in the world that was lost. Here's what I can tell you. I can tell you with absolute certainty, every single super successful human being I have ever worked with has had a green room behind the stage that was a disaster and they felt like they had no idea what was going on. So you're not alone. The other thing is that you don't have to know all of the things. You're allowed to ask questions. You're allowed to bring people in. You're allowed to have someone go, look, you're really good at this. And here, this is key. I'm going to say this twice. Believe them. When people tell you you're good at something, believe them. When people offer to help you, accept it. I think so often we feel like we have to do it the hard way for it to count. And then we end up with imposter syndrome because we're trying to do it the hard way with no help from anybody and we can't do it ourselves. It's a very circular, broken model.
Well, we do spend a lot of time trying to say, well, look, I guess I can figure this out. And, God invented Google for a reason, right? I mean, it's funny when I call, it's hilarious when I call the cable company and I have an issue and they're like, wait, what's that again? And I describe it and they're like, hang on 1 second. Can I put you on a brief 1 to 2 minute hold? And I know they're freaking Googling it. They don't know the answers to this crap. So, and they come back and they basically recite to me what I could have just, typed in myself when it's not, just unplug the back of your cable box or something. But anyways, but that's perfect. So if someone is going through that though, and you say, again, believe them and so forth, but how, it's interesting when I hear it from someone who's extremely accomplished in business and they've done so many things and they're like, how the hell am I even up here and so forth. But a lot of times what I'll say is, look, start reading some of the other books from people that are your peers. And when you read it and you start saying, wait a minute, I know all this stuff already. You're there. It's just, sometimes we have a habit, I think, of like, look, when I go play golf, I play every once in a while, infrequently, but I'm like, I've got to be as good as Tiger Woods, or I've got to be and that's ridiculous. I suck. And I play once at whatever it is. But
and remember, when you find yourself in a circle of people like you, so when I was getting my doctoral degree, everybody had a doctoral degree. Literally everyone I associated with in grad school had a doctoral degree. It was not that impressive. When I wrote my book, everybody I was associating with was in the process of writing a book. It was not that impressive. And so sometimes you have to look outside of your little bubble where everybody's doing all the things that you're doing and realize, oh, wait, this isn't common knowledge. I could actually use this to help someone else or make a difference or make a living or whatever that means. But you have to get outside of your bubble where everyone already does it.
That's perfect. Now, before we go further, I just want to point out that on the right side, you'll see there's a section called Q&A. If any of you have questions for Dr. Robyn or myself, please, I encourage you to put them in there and we'll be able to see them much easier than if they pop into chat. But as you can see, I mean, there's you spend all day talking about all this stuff. This is fascinating. So if someone calls you up and they're clearly in some form of a panic, I mean, again, there's a tendency for us to get calls when things are heading south, or in my case, maybe it'll be, hey, I have this interview in an hour. What should I do? But it's always like, the fire's burning. What is your style in terms of how do you get someone to sort of take a breath?
Well, the first thing is my clients trust me. And so I tell them, I'm happy to be the rock in the hurricane. Anytime life is blowing around you, you throw me a lifeline and I'm going to haul in on it as hard as I can. I'm going to bring you into the rock. We're going to figure it out. Whether you need to talk through it, we need to come up with an answer, whatever. But you cut the rope, I'm letting you go back. I'm not swimming into the hurricane after you. And that really lets my clients know I'm in, but only if you're in. And so that, for me, setting that groundwork is really helpful.
That's interesting because there are people that when they call, it seems like they don't want to listen. They just need to let it out.
And that's
And
okay too sometimes.
how do you, so is that how you reel them back in though, as you give that hurricane analogy? That's a good one.
That's one. And the other thing I let people do is they'll talk to me and then I'll literally interrupt them. I say, hold on, let me make sure. Here's what I'm hearing. X, Y. There's a style called motivational interviewing, which is the ability to talk to someone and you pick out the flowers of what they're saying and then you hand it back to them as a bouquet and say, is that what you really have going on? And give them the opportunity to change it or agree with it.
In the past, when myself or some other buddies would rant about whatever it was, my other friend he had a much simpler way. He'd give us three-word reply. He'd say, "Are you done?"
And that works. Depending upon your relationship, that works. It can also embarrass someone to shutting up and they're not done.
I know, but it was.
You have to know your client.
Yeah, you have to know your client. No, I would never. Oh my God, I wouldn't say that. Because either they'll say, "No, I'm not done," and then continue on for too long, or they'll be pissed off that you said that. So, but it was very effective on us for sure.
My husband's really good. If I get wound up, he'll say, "Are you okay?" Clearly, I'm not okay. Okay, just making sure.
I can remember that one. Okay, so, but that's great. So, with the advent of things like, what is it, AI and ChatGPT and all these things and so forth, tell me a little bit about how you've used it and or how you think people out there could be using it to really better themselves up here.
One thing that I like to do with it, I did this recently. I think I mentioned it to you. I took all of my collateral. Well, not all, not my podcast, but my website, my email marketing, my bio, like pretty much any written copy I had. And I wrote a prompt for it and I put it in there and I basically asked it, who are my clients? And it spit it right out. I'm like, okay, good. I'm explaining that well. It understands. And then I asked it, what are the pain points I help my clients with? And it gave me a list that was worded in a way I would not have worded it, that really opened my eyes to say, oh, that's what I'm saying. And that's true. And that's what I do. And that was really, really useful. I enjoyed that a lot, to be able to say, am I giving the message that I intend to, and have it say, this is what I'm hearing. Is that what you mean? So I used it kind of as a mirror for myself.
Well, that's fantastic, because it's interesting. Obviously there's a lot of talk about, well, using AI. Is it a good thing? Is it not a good thing? Is it a crutch? Is it this? Is it that? But it is what it is.
You want my analogy?
Yeah, go for it.
We don't tell carpenters that they're using a crutch when they use a pneumatic nailer instead of a rock. Like, technology advances and we embrace it as humans and we move forward. So to say that this new technology is a crutch, I think, is expecting a carpenter to use a rock.
What's this pneumatic nailer thing you speak of?
I can do some construction. Don't start with me.
I like a rock though sometimes. Anyways, that's a whole other story. So wrapping things up here, because I want to jump back and have a chance for everybody to really be able to speak to you directly. But tell me, who are 3 people who you would love to have dinner with, who are either alive or dead?
This is such a tough question, because I like human beings. I like interesting human beings.
Yeah.
And I read astrophysics for fun, because I like things that make my brain go, wait, hold on, back up. What now? So being able to talk to an astrophysics would probably blow my mind, but I would have so much fun. That and quantum physics, so much fun. Like, I don't understand, back up. And I read a quote recently that said, if you think you understand quantum physics, you're not studying it well enough, because it's just so confusing.
Nice.
So definitely astrophysics, quantum physics would be on my list. I also teach my dog circus tricks for fun. So that, people who do dog training is fun for me. But to give you names, I don't think I could, because the table, because here's why. Let me tell you why.
Yeah.
The table I'm at is the table that's the most interesting in the moment. I am never the person who knows all the things. And you can say that that's a cop-out, or you can say that that's me being curious. And is it fair for you to pigeonhole me and say, you have to choose people, or allow me to say, I like these topics broadly? Sports psychology.
So it's fair. No, so taking a step back, and that's fine. But I'm taking a step back. I've heard some really interesting answers. But one thing that I don't hear, because I've had 100+ guests in here and so forth, right? Speakers, and usually it's very contemporary people. Occasionally it'll be historical figures. It'll be Martin Luther King or
Marcus Aurelius.
Well, no, that's the thing, is that people don't dig way back. Because I say, I'll say, look, and this is, sorry to say this, but I'd say, look, I'd love to hang out and talk to Jesus, but maybe when he was like, a teen or something, like hanging out and kicking a soccer ball or whatever they did back then. I don't think he was walking around the whole, when he was 8 years old. So, I'd love to, I got to be careful though, because I know I'm bordering on sacrilege here, but that would be really interesting. Or of course, whether it's, just any of George Washington. Just hanging out with him for having a beer and talking, it would be incredible. So.
Do you see, we have a question.
Bring it on.
It says, what are the first steps a former athlete should take at the end of their career who is looking for what's next? The first thing I would do is do an inventory of what you're really good at. And most athletes are really good at problem solving. They're really good at in the moment thinking, being able to take lots of information and condense it down to, in this moment, we have to make this choice, and being able to explain that in an effective way. So that would be the very first step I would take, is figure out what you're really, really good at. And that's hard to do on your own, because going back to that whole idea, I can do it, everybody can do it, I'm average, is so easy to fall into.
Yeah, and I guess part of the advice I give is I say, look, there's one thing to find some stuff that you enjoy doing, but then there's also the whole point of an athlete when they're playing, their focus is on plan A. There's no plan B. There's no, well, when I retire from this sport, I'm going to do blank. They're not thinking. If they think that, then they've lost. So when I speak to a current athlete, I say, look, instead of trying to figure out what your plan B is, focus on some of the things that you really love doing that are outside your sport. What are some of your outside interests? How can you develop a secondary interest that might someday grow into something? So if today you happen to love photography, or you happen to love real estate, or you really have an interest in finance in the markets, or you like music, or whatever it is, well, then that's something that you can certainly develop while you're still playing, and sort of make that into something where you start developing and make connections and network with people that happen to be tied in with photography, music, etc. And then it makes that transition post-career that much easier. But the bottom line to me is that every athlete, when they're playing and while they're playing their sport, they wake up every morning just excited to be playing, in your case, beach volleyball, or in others, basketball, whatever it might be, and they love their sport. And then when they stop loving it, it's the time to sort of start wrapping things up. But I want them to wake up every single morning excited to do what they're doing next. And everyone deserves that. Everyone deserves the opportunity to wake up in the morning and jump out of bed and say, yeah, let's go. I'm fired up. And not, oh shit, another day at whatever it is doing blank. And that to me is the first step, is to really start thinking about, well, what are some of the secondary interests and things that you've loved doing, just what you were saying, and be able to leverage that into a career after you retire.
And one of the challenges for athletes and people who are coming out of the military, their lives have been very regimented. You do this and you do this and you do this and you get success, and you do this and you do this and you get success, and then you do some analysis and you do performance and you do evaluation, and then you get success. When you come out, all of that structure goes away, and figuring out, who am I? Who do I identify as, and what structure do I want? Am I an early bird? Do I actually want to get out of bed at 6? Or am I more productive in the evening? And is that something like, who are you? I think is one of the hardest things. When I got out of my first marriage and I had to figure out, who am I as an adult at 26 years old? That was tough.
Well, most people aren't quite adults at that age even. That's the amazing thing. And starting at 18 doing that must have been quite the... All right, when's the book coming out? Come on, let's go.
I know everybody wants me to write a book about my life, and then I'm like, but who's going to actually read it? I do have a title though. I have a working title, so we'll see.
Well, then make it a movie. Forget the whole damn book.
That would be much better. Movie is much better, absolutely. But yeah, I would absolutely love to connect with everybody here, have one-on-ones, chat with them, see what we can do. Fun times.
Well, speaking of that, Dr. Robyn, what's the best way for people to find you out there?
The easiest way is on LinkedIn. I'm super active there. I have my podcast, Quick Hits, which is 4 people, 10 minutes, one topic. So if you like talking on the fly, because you don't know what your topic is till the day before, I would encourage you to come and be on my podcast. It's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to get hooked into my network and meet other people, other quick hitters.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. As we jammed so much stuff into 30 some odd minutes. So I really appreciate that. You're fantastic. I love what you do, and I love your perspective and your energy and your calming influence when needed. But also, we talked about this the other day, your ability to make people angry. And I love that too.
Not afraid to make them angry.
Not afraid to make them
That's
angry.
my job. My job is to tell the truth, even if they don't want to hear it.
Thank you so much, though. This has been fantastic. Appreciate your time, and best of luck going forward. There's lots coming up.
Thanks, Mark.
Appreciate it. Of course.